Howdy. Howdy, howdy, howdy. We are in here Saturday. Happy Shabbat. We are live. Are we live? I got my tab up to check. Yes, we are live. I'm more prepared. I already had the tab up on YouTube. I just want to see that I'm live on YouTube because it would be really awful if I start this thing and just realized after an hour of supposedly streaming that I'm not actually live and I was just talking to myself. So I've had a lot of technical issues in my past to realize, let me just make sure that it's actually working. So we are here. Today is going to be a lot simpler of a Bible study for me, at least, than the previous ones. I did not make it from scratch. We're going to be going over a previous sermon that was done at my church. Now, if you don't like the sermon, let me know. If you're just like, you know what? I don't like that pastor. I don't like the sermon. I don't like that church. I just don't like it. It's your opinion. And just let me know. And maybe I'll just do my own stuff from scratch. Because part of YouTube is actually be of service to you all. And it's like a balance in between what I want to do and what you want from me. Find that healthy balance. So, but I hope you enjoy it. And we're going to go ahead and get it started because I have to go to basically Atlanta after this and meet up with somebody. And it's a good hour and a half drive. So I'm going to go ahead and get through this as quick as possible, but still take the time to really dive into it.
All right, good morning, church. It's great to be back. Last weekend, for those of you who don't know, I was in Schroon Lake, New York, speaking at the Word of Life Bible Institute to the 400 or so students they have there, and it was a great time. They had a missions conference for these kids, but they really called these kids to missions and ministry, and about 150 of them made the decision last weekend that, hey, they're going to give God their lives. They're going to do whatever he led them to do. So thanks for letting me go there. And I know the old man was here. My dad was here. I heard he did a decent job, okay job. But I know he was excited to be up here. But we've been talking about work. We're talking about maybe.
Yeah, and I didn't even specify this. This whole sermon is about work. Well, I did put it in the title and the thumbnail. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I'm like, do I need to hear this? But it's like when he went over the sermon, I'm like, okay, this can apply to anybody, I think. So.
Made for Mondays. And I don't know about you, but I love my job. Now, I've only been in this.
If I'm honest, I don't love my job where I'm currently working.
Current role for about 2 months now, but I love ministry. I feel like I was made to do ministry. Now, I'm not saying that I always love it when my alarm goes off every single morning. I'm not saying that that there aren't moments when I'm not excited. There are those days when I'm not excited to go to work, okay? But I am saying I was made for Mondays. I was made to do what I do. Now, but it's.
And that's the place that I'm trying to get to be actually doing what I'm made to do. And I hope that's y'all's goal too.
I mean, there are a lot of people in our world and even in our community and probably even in our church who don't always feel that they were made for Mondays, who don't always love what they do, who don't always feel that they were created to do what it is that they're doing. Now, of course, sometimes it's not the work itself that they don't like. It's the people connected to the work that they don't like. Maybe it's their coworkers or their boss or the clientele that they serve. But
yeah, and I have a lot of experience with bosses who, in my opinion, were bad bosses for sure. One experience with a really bad coworker, that was just one job, but most for me personally, it's been bad bosses. And y'all, don't be shy to chat. You can definitely comment during this time.
That those people make work not as much fun for them, but in the end, there's a lot of people who don't love their jobs, who don't love going to work, who don't feel that they were made for Mondays. And this is obvious in any number of ways, but one of the ways in this which is most obvious, one of the ways I see a negative mentality about Mondays, about work, is on the back of your cars. on bumper stickers. Now, I know that a lot of these bumper stickers kind of have a tongue-in-cheek sort of message associated with them, but there's a lot of negative bumper stickers about work, and so I've scoured the internet looking for some of these. I didn't have to look very far because one of these was actually on our cars in our parking lot. But here's some of the things that I see. This is a classic one. I owe, it's off to work I go, right? This is the mentality that some of us have when it comes to work. I've got bills to pay. That's the only reason I'm going to work. I owe. Second one.
Yeah, and I just want to say that's some of the mentality that I've had, if I'm honest. You know, I got bills to pay. I got stuff to pay for. That's why I'm going to work. So I definitely, I can definitely relate to that.
I had a life, but my job ate it. Some of you can relate to that. You resemble that. You feel that. Like you were excited about, your life and getting this new job or moving down this new career path, and then all of a sudden it just swallowed you whole. And the next one, work is for people who don't know how to fish. This is the one I saw in our parking lot. And not on a Sunday, during the week. So one of our staff has this, which tells me they don't know how to fish because they need a job here. So I'm assuming. Next one. Hard work never killed anyone, but why take the chance? That's how some of you feel. I'm going to give that minimal effort at work, just enough to get by. And then finally, this is my favorite one. Work fascinates me. I could sit and watch it for hours. Some of you can relate to that. Now, again, I know these are mostly silly examples, but at the same time, I think they do speak to our culture's general dread of work. They communicate, if I can say it this way, that for most of us at least, work is not something we want to do, but something we have to do, okay? Work is not something we want to do, but work is something we have to do.
And I agree with that for the most part. Now, I do think it's possible to eventually do what you love to do. I do think that's possible. And there's people who actually do that. For example, for me, doing this full time is what I really aspire to do and what I feel like I'd love to do. I mean, I'm loving to do it now. The only downside is I kind of have to rush some things because I work a full-time job. So it's like I don't have the time to dedicate to this that I really want to. So yeah, I think some people think work is something that you'll just have to not like, but I do think it's possible to be able to do something that you're passionate about.
Feel compelled to do. Now, with that said, I don't know how you feel about your work. I don't know how you view what you do, but I would guess that most of you see it, regardless of what it is that you do, in one of four ways. Now, there are more ways to view your work than this, but I sort of categorize them loosely in these four ways. Some of you see work as a necessary evil. It's that whole I owe, it's off to work I go, right? You have to work because you have bills to pay, mouths to feed, that sort of thing. You see work as a necessary evil. Some of you, though, see work as an avenue to get what you want, to fund that hobby or that career, or to get that new car, that new house, whatever it is. That's how you see your work. It doesn't just put food on your table, it provides more than that. Some of you see work as a way to make you feel better about yourself. And here's what I mean. Some of us find our identity in work, right? We find our very, sense of identity in our work and what we do. We let our work define us. And then finally, some of you see work as an opportunity to help others. You generally have an others first mentality when it comes to your work, and you're serving the needs of others. Now, of course, there are other ways to view your work. I'm not going to go into all, but just in general, those are four approaches, four mentalities to have when it comes to work. But what if, here's what I want to propose to you. What if we saw our work as something different? What if we saw our work not as something secular, but as something sacred? Not as something that we have to do, but something that God created us to do, wired us to do, made us to do. Let me explain. I don't know if you're aware of this, but God is the one who came up with the idea of work. Like God invented work. God literally built work into our society, the fabric of our society from the very beginning. And although we rarely think of work this way, work is from God, created by God. And God not only designed work, came up with it, right? He demonstrated work. What does God do? The very first 6 days of creation, He goes to work. He speaks things into existence. He sets an example for us. He models what work looks like. For 6 days, he goes to work. And so God worked and again, created everything in it. And by the way, although we don't have time to get into this, he continues to work. He continues to sustain and do all the things that God does. But not only did God design work and demonstrate work, here's the thing that we need to walk away with understanding this morning. God demands work. God expects us to work.
Yep.
Let me explain. In the 10 Commandments, whether you realize it or not, God actually commands us to work. Now, most of us familiar with the 10 Commandments are like, hold on, where's that one at? It's buried in the 4th commandment. We only talk about the first part of the 4th commandment. Here's the first part of that commandment. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. And so that's the part we focus on. But the 4th commandment is actually a rather lengthy one. And here's what happens just after this. 6 days you shall labor. You shall get after it. You shall work and do all your work. And so I say all that.
That sounds kind of wild, right? I know there's actually a book called The 4-Hour Work Week. And it's like, I think today, a lot of people have the goal to not work that much. Like, definitely not 5 days a week and definitely not 6 days a week. But it's like it's in the Bible. In the commandments, as you just pointed out, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. So from that scripture is like, can we just think we should work 3 days a week, 2 days a week? Now, I don't know. I was just thinking like, how does that apply to vacations? You know, I don't know. I'm not going to speak on that because I don't know how it applies there, but it just made me think about it because vacations, you know, they're a set time you have set aside to not work, and you may go for a week on vacation and not work that full week. So, because I don't know, I didn't really study that much about it. I'm not going to speak about it, but I just thought about like, what about vacations? But if y'all know, you know, something about that, let me know. But we'll keep it moving.
I could go on and on, but I say all that to say this. This is my point. Work is not just a good thing, but a God thing. God designed it, he demonstrated it, and he demands work. Now, with that said, not everyone sees work as a God thing. Again, many of us see it as a necessary evil or a way to get what we want or any number of other things, but work is a God thing. However, just because it's a God thing doesn't necessarily mean that God's people are always going to be motivated to work as hard as they can. And in some cases, they may even avoid work altogether. And I'm going to give you an example of this. In fact, believe it or not, in the early days of the church, there were some Christians, specifically in the ancient Greek city of Thessalonica, who didn't want to work at all. Now, we don't really know
Lazy.
why they didn't want to work. There's some speculation, some theories about why they didn't want to work. But whatever the reason, some of these Thessalonian Christians just weren't interested in working at all. So Paul, who started the church in Thessalonica, who brought the good news of Jesus to these people, brings this issue up to them and tells them face to face, hey, look, you're supposed to work. God created you to work. There's work to do. Like you need to be someone who works. Paul eventually leaves because this is just what he did. He would go to new places and start new churches. And eventually he leaves Thessalonica. And while he's away, he gets word that, hey, Paul, there's still some people in the church who aren't working. They're sort of mooching off of the rest of us, and they're able to work, but they're not working. So Paul, in his first letter to these Christians, says these words. He doesn't use a lot of words to talk about this, but he does address this. He says, you should mind your own business and work with your hands. You know who I'm talking to. Just as we told you, face to face. So that, here's why you need to do this. Your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, people outside the faith, don't have a relationship with Jesus. That's why you need to work hard. And so that you will not be dependent on anybody. So
That's good. I'm gonna pause it right there because I actually went to my study Bible and got some more notes on the scripture specifically. And this is the Life Application Study Bible by Tyndale House Publishers. Christian living is more than simply loving other Christians. We must be responsible in all areas of life. Some of the Thessalonian Christians had adopted a life of idleness, depending on others for handouts. Some Greeks looked down on manual labor. So Paul told the Thessalonians to work hard and to live quiet lives. You can't be effective in sharing your faith with others if they don't respect you. Whatever you do, do it faithfully and be a positive force in society.
So Paul tells them face to face, hey, you guys, you need to work. In fact, we're going to look later, a rule he actually gave them, a principle he told them to live by. And then he writes this letter to them and tells them, hey, you guys need to work. Hey, people outside of the faith are watching you and they're seeing how you live. And it's not very desirable. It's not the model kind of life. So get to work already. Again, he says, we told you. Now, at least one of the reasons Paul brings this up is because, again, people in the church who weren't working were taking advantage of the people in the church who were working. They were, again, mooching off, taking advantage of these Christians' generosity. And the unemployed were becoming a burden on the employed. Now, when I say unemployed, I mean these people are unemployed by choice. They have made the decision.
And I'm laughing because it sounds crazy to me now. But I used to be one of those people. Not long ago. Really not too long ago. Years ago, but not long ago in the broad scale of things.
We don't want anything to do with work. So let me just make this.
So I actually did research on some verses that apply to this that he didn't mention in the sermon. But I had in my notes app, I took some verses to memorize. I didn't memorize these, but I've tried to over time. I need to memorize them, but they relate to not being lazy. They relate to how working hard will benefit your life, really. So just going to read them out. Proverbs, a lot of these are in Proverbs, by the way. Proverbs gives you wisdom about life. So Proverbs chapter 15, verse 19, NIV. The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. Sluggard means lazy, slothful. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verses 18, NIV. Through laziness, the rafters sag. Because of idle hands, the house leaks. The house leaks. I don't want a leaky house. I don't know about y'all, but that's not what I want. So don't be lazy. Romans chapter 12, verse 11, NLT. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Never be lazy. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 4, NIV. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Let that sink in. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. And I actually looked over that scripture a lot because I come from a past of being lazy, not wanting to work. And the main reason was not because I didn't like hard work specifically, but I think the main reason was I didn't like doing work I didn't like to do. And that's the only type of jobs I could get at the time, doing jobs I didn't want to do. And I was like, why am I alive and have to do stuff I don't like to do? It seems like unfair. And that was just my mindset in the past. And some of it kind of is, but it's because of the fall of man, sin into the world. So now, things are just unfair, and you may have to start out doing something you don't want to do to get to doing something you want to do. Just because this world is imperfect and things aren't going to go the way you want them to go all the time. So Proverbs, another proverb, chapter 13, verse 4, KJV. The soul of the sluggard desireth and have nothing. So desires, you desire, but you have nothing because you're a sluggard. But the soul of the diligent shall be made fat, meaning the diligent will have more than nothing. Will have actually an abundance, because it's saying shall be made fat. The diligent people will have an abundance of whatever they need. All right, let's continue.
It's clear. They can work. These people in the church can work, but they just won't work. They have the ability, they have the opportunity to work, but they have just decided we don't want to work. And so Paul writes another letter, a second letter to the Christians living in this city. And near the end of this second letter, he brings up the issue of work for the third time, by the way. And this time he uses a lot more words to address this in his previous letter. And just so you know, it may not seem like it as we read through this, but this letter has great application to all of us as well. Here's what he says in this. And again, he takes a lot more words and uses a lot more forceful words. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we command you, brothers and sisters. We're gonna get to the command in just a minute, but I want you to notice the spirit in which he's writing this. He says, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, which indicates, hey, look, these are not merely my personal matter, my personal feelings or opinions about this issue, but I have the authority of Jesus himself behind me. What I'm about to say to you is not just something that I feel strongly about, it's something Jesus feels strongly about, which means if any of you decide you're gonna dismiss everything that I'm about to say, you're ultimately dismissing the words of Jesus. Additionally, you might have noticed, and this is a small matter, but he says we. And this is because, hey, he's like, hey, Silas and Timothy, they were with me when we started this church in Thessalonica. They're still with me to this day. We are all in agreement with Jesus that about these words that we're about to say to you. And then Paul gives them the actual command. In the name of the Lord Jesus, we command you to keep away from every believer who is idle and disruptive. He's gonna explain what that means a little bit later. And does not live according to the teaching you received from us. Paul commands all those believers who are currently working, who are currently, employed.
Yeah, that seems kind of harsh, right? But it had to be said. Now I got some more study Bible notes that were good. How y'all doing? I haven't seen you on the chat yet. What's up? But this is talking about chapter 3, verses 6 through 10. Paul was writing here about the person who is lazy. Paul explained that when he and his companions were in Thessalonica, they worked hard, buying what they needed rather than becoming a burden to any of the believers. The rule they followed was those unwilling to work will not get to eat. There's a difference between leisure and laziness. Relaxation and recreation provide a necessary and much needed balance to our lives. When it is time to work, however, Christians should jump right in. We should make the most of our talent and time, doing all we can to provide for ourselves and our dependents. Rest when you should be resting, and work when you should be working.
To stay away, to keep away, to avoid altogether those believers who are not. And again, he's talking about those who can be employed but just are deciding not to be employed. He says you need to stay away from these people. Move away from these people who have decided for whatever reason that work is entirely unnecessary. Now, I want to be clear. I want to make sure you understand. Paul is not saying don't help the poor, don't help the disabled, don't help those who are less fortunate. He's not saying anything like that. And I say that because on multiple occasions, Paul took up collections on his missionary journeys for people who were poor, who were less fortunate. He would ask churches who were well off to provide for churches who weren't as well off. So that's not what he's saying here. Instead, Paul is talking about able-bodied people in the church who, for whatever reason, just don't want to do anything. It's not like they can't find work. They can. This is about people inside the church too, not outside. Inside the church who can work but won't work. And Paul makes it clear, look, if there's any individuals in your church who refuse to work, the rest of the church needs to distance themselves from them. This is not minimize your time with these people, only, cut back to coffee once a week with these people. This is get away, stay away, do not be around these kinds of people. Now, if that sounds harsh, it's because it is harsh, right? This is very purposeful. And again, Paul's gonna build in this argument. We're gonna see why he's so harsh, but it is harsh. But Paul wants them to know, if you're a follower of Jesus, it is wrong for you to just mooch off of other followers of Jesus when you have the ability to work and decide that you're not going to.
And this reminds me of another verse. And this is specifically talking about those who are lazy, those who don't want to work. But this reminds me of a verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 11. I meant that you are not to associate with anyone who claims to be a believer, yet indulges in sexual sin, or is greedy, or worships idols, or is abusive, or is a drunkard, or cheats people. Don't even eat with such people. Paul didn't play any games, y'all. He was serious and straight up. Do not associate. And here he's talking about those who just don't want to work. And then in 1 Corinthians, he's talking about basically those who are living in different types of sins. It sounds harsh, but it's supposed to be harsh. And he's going to go into it, pastor of Southside Church. But yeah, it just reminds me, it connects, y'all. It connects, and this is something that I might actually bring up in a future video. Not going to go too deep into it now, as this is a Bible study. But yeah, I might talk about it after this is done.
Work. And remember, he's already told them this before, right? He's told them this to their faces. He told them this in the first letter, and now for the third time, he is bringing this up to them. One more thought here. While it may not seem like it now, and this will be much more obvious as we continue reading through this letter, but here's the goal. The purpose of pushing them out was to pull them in. The purpose of pushing these people out of the church and say, hey, get away from them, is to pull them back in. So in other words, he's not trying to send them packing as much as he's trying to stop their slacking.
He did the church rhymes. Classic church rhymes.
He's not trying to say, hey, be done with them forever. He's just trying to solve the problem in the church. There are people who will not work, and they're a poor representation of Jesus in their community. And so Paul is like, hey, we need to send a strong message to these people. Well, they need to know. And maybe when we separate ourselves from them, this will be a motivation for them. And they'll realize.
I didn't mean to cut him off, but I just wanted to add some more notes to this. I think this is the last Bible study. No, it's not, but this is some notes on Thessalonians. Is it 2 Thessalonians we're in now? I think it's 2 Thessalonians. Not sure, but chapter 3, verses 11 through 12. An idle person, who I think I just clipped the audio right there. Sorry about that. An idle person who doesn't work ends up filling his or her time with less than helpful activities like gossip, rumors, and hearsay and they're tantalizing, exciting to hear, and make us feel like insiders, but they tear people down. If you often find your nose in other people's business, you may be underemployed. Look for a task to do for Christ or for your family and get to work. The study Bible isn't playing there. Look for a task to do and get to work. And I want to emphasize, while I do support to call out mess in the church, y'all, as I do that, such as false teachers, false prophets, sin, calling all that out, I do want to make a clear distinction that I don't support gossip and that I don't support tearing people down just for the sake of like tearing people down, like bullying. And I think there's a distinction there, calling out mess in the church versus tearing people down, bullying them. There's a distinction.
Realize I am made for Mondays. I need to go to work. But then after these more confrontational kinds of words, Paul proceeds to make the argument that what he's asking them to do is something that he literally has modeled in front of them. He has personally shown them what hard work looks like. Look at what he says. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example. We were not idle.
Yeah, 2 Thessalonians.
When we were with you, Paul says, look, it wasn't that long ago when Silas, Timothy, and myself, we were all with you in Thessalonica, when we lived there in the city with you. And while we were there, you know this, you yourselves know this, we modeled hard work. We showed you what hard work looked like. You saw with your own eyes how hard we worked, how much we worked. You know, we worked our tails off when we were around you. We modeled this right in front of you. And then notice what he adds to the end of this, because I sort of interrupted him. Nor did we eat anyone's food without paying for it. Now, when Paul says they didn't when they didn't eat anyone's food without paying for it, he's not saying that they were never on the receiving end of anyone's hospitality. That's not what he's saying at all. Instead, he's saying, in general, we took care of our own needs. We provided for ourselves. He's saying, we never asked any of you to ever pick up the check. In fact, we picked up the check before you could. We wanted to set the example, lead the way. We didn't mooch off of others in the same way that some in the church right now are currently mooching off of you. We were never a drain financially on any of you in the church. Now, with that said, again, there were times when Paul absolutely accepted other people's help, other churches' help, when his needs were met by others. If you've read his different epistles, letters, you know this. There were times when he was on the receiving end of someone else's generosity. But during his time in Thessalonica, most likely because he could tell this was gonna be an issue in this city, he decided, you know what? We're not gonna be able to take anything from this people because they got a problem.
Yeah, so I took a note about this when I was preparing for this. I'm just gonna read it. So yeah, even though I want to do this YouTube thing full time, this is one of the big reasons why I just won't quit my job right now. Even though sometimes I want to. While my channel is still small. Because I don't want to ask for funds from my subscribers, my followers in such a desperate position. I have actually no income coming in at all, zero income. And therefore I have to put all the pressure to support my life and living expenses on the small amount of followers that I do have. That is a big reason why I won't do that. Just as Paul didn't do that to the church in Thessalonica. Oh my gosh, that's hard to say. Thessalonica. There we go. Thessalonica. He took care of the bills, you know. He didn't make them pay for stuff, even though he kind of had the right to, as somebody who was ministering to them. So yeah, that's one reason why I just won't quit my job right now. Yeah, I do have a few hardcore fans. Shout out to y'all, but I actually think it'd be wrong to just quit my job and be like, oh my, you know, I'm just going to put on my small amount of followers to support my whole life. You know, and basically ask for donations every other second in every video for my channel. I don't want to be that desperate to do that. Now, I think if I lost my job, that's a different story. Like if they fired me or something, but then I would still try to find another job. I think if God is leading me to do that. So yeah, that would create a large burden for the ones who currently support my work. However, when my channel grows a lot and I have more supporters at that point, I can start a Patreon, and it's not going to be like a big financial burden to any specific person because now the channel has grown. There's a lot of subscribers, a lot of supporters. No one person has to be like paying me like, I don't know, $100, $200 a month just to support me. But for example, like Ruslan, he has a Patreon where people pay, I think the minimum is $5 a month, and he has like 1,000+ people doing it. So if you have 1,000+ people on your Patreon giving you $5, which is not that much, a month. That's $50,000 a year. Well, before Patreon takes this cut, I don't know what the cut of is Patreon. I don't know what the cut is of Patreon and then taxes. But before that, that's $50,000 a year. You can somewhat live on that depending on where you live in the US. But that's with his level of a channel. Haven't reached that yet. So I think it would not be wise to quit my job and to be dependent on my followers now and mooch off y'all. Not going to do that. But I just wanted to tie that into what Pastor was saying here of why Paul was taking care of his things, his needs financially, not relying upon the Thessalonians.
Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get to work. And we're going to show them what work looks like. We're going to work inside the church. We're going to still do all the ministry we normally do. And this is why he says night and day. But, after hours, we're going to have to put in some work ourselves so we can provide for ourselves and not expect this church to do this. They need us to be an example here. And he makes this obvious in what he says next. He says we could have done this, but he says, on the contrary, we worked again night and day, laboring and toiling so that we would not be a burden to any of you. We could have taken advantage of you. Paul reminds them, look, when we were living in your city again, we got after it. We worked night and day, laboring and toiling. And again, he's just communicating that we didn't want to be a burden to any of you in the church. Now, while we don't really know what kind of work that Paul did in Thessalonica, my guess is, because he did this in other places, is that when he arrived in Thessalonica, he got right to work making tents. This is what he did. Evidently, he was skilled with scissors and leather and cords, and he would make tents. He would create tents. Again, we know that he did this in other places, so we imagine this is probably what he did in Thessalonica as well. This is the laboring and toiling that he's talking about. And then Paul explains for the second time, really, why he, and again, those who were with him did this. We did this not because we do not have the right to such help, but in order to, here's the purpose, to offer ourselves as a model for you to imitate. Paul argues, look, because we were doing ministry in your city, because we were helping get a church started, we had every right to ask for financial help. Because that took up a lot of our time. And you know it, you were around this, you saw all the effort it took. You saw how we were talking about Jesus everywhere that we went and all the efforts we went to try to have conversations with people. But at the same time, you should know we also refused to accept and exercise those rights. We refused to take anything from you, even though we could, because we wanted to set an example, because you needed an example of what hard work looked like. And then Paul brings up a principle that he had evidently left with them, a takeaway from their time together. He calls it a rule. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule, this principle, this dominating thought we wanted to keep in front of you. The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat.
I just want to say, I've heard that scripture so many times, but I never understood the right context of it. So I never read the book of Thessalonians. I'm reading the Bible from beginning to end. I'm just not there yet. So I heard the scripture so much, the one who isn't willing to work shall not eat. But now I finally understand the context because of how he did the sermon so well. It's like, if those who are so lazy and they're mooching off other Christians who are working, Paul's trying to bring some order to the church, trying to bring some kind of system, some fairness to it all, and saying, hey, if you're going to mooch off those who are working, you're just deciding not to work just because you just don't want to, you're able to, you just don't want to, you're mooching, and guess what? We're not going to feed you. So that's the context, and I just want to say, now I understand it, and hopefully you should too.
Paul says, look, when we were with you for those couple of months, helping to get the church off the ground, you remember, I kept repeating this principle over and over and over again because I knew it was going to take me saying that over and over again to get it in your thick skulls. And I said, the one who doesn't work doesn't eat. Paul says, look, when we were with you for those months, like I kept saying this over.
What's up, Gary? Hope all is well with you and yours.
Over. Now, this is not a complicated principle, is it? Nobody would say, hey, Paul, what do you mean by unwilling to work? We're confused. Nobody said that, right? Or what do you mean, shall not eat? What do you mean by that? No, it's very obvious what this means. You don't work, you don't show, be an example of work, then the rest of the church doesn't need to take care of you. You're just mooching off of them at that point. So they knew. Now, I want to be, again, clear on this, and I know I'm being repetitive here, but I don't want anyone walking away from this, message getting the wrong idea. You have to understand the context, okay? Paul is not talking about people who are in genuine need and can't provide for themselves. That's not what he's talking about. Paul is talking about followers of Jesus specifically who can work but choose not to. Okay, so don't say, well, I should never help anybody. That's not the context.
In other words, those who are just being lazy. That's essentially. And if you watch my testimony, y'all, my 10-part testimony series, you know that I was one of those people who just didn't want to work. Because I explained to them, yeah, there was a time period where I just didn't have a job. And I even flew overseas, had a whole vacation. Well, wasn't really a vacation, but had a whole adventure overseas off my parents' money. Even though they weren't wealthy, they were lower middle class. But I just chose not to work and to travel. Very just dishonorable to my parents and just a messed up thing to do. But I wasn't saved then, and I made a bad decision. And yeah, so laziness is something that we should definitely leave in our past. As children of God, we definitely need to be diligent, be good representatives of Christ. What's up, Gary, man? I was going to say the video you did on Young Don was well done, and I think that those are the kind of videos to focus on while building your channel. Appreciate that, man. So this one right here is a Bible study that I do once a week, and it's kind of just a live stream. Not like the brunt of my content on my channel, but I appreciate the feedback on that. Yeah, I'm trying to find that one type of video style that's just works for me, something that just works for me, that is successful, that just takes off. I haven't seen that video yet. The average views on my channel, I'd say maybe 500 views per video, the average. The Young Don's coming up on 1,000 views now. But let's say I get a video that hits that breaks 10,000 views. Oh no, okay. Maybe I need to focus on this type of video style because it broke 10,000 views. I never had a video that broke 10,000 views before. So then I could make that a repetitive kind of formula that I do. But I'm still kind of playing around with different types of video styles. Just trying to see when that takes off, see what takes off. But yeah, I appreciate that. I did put a lot of work into that video. And I actually do call out other false teachers too. Called out Lecrae, which he's not exactly a teacher, but he's a figure in the Christian community. And I just called out Chandler Moore. So it's kind of similar to the Young Don video, but just a different person.
He's talking about followers of Jesus who've decided, you know what? We're not going to work. We're going to try to mooch off, take advantage of all the people who are. That's what's happening here. And then finally, Paul speaks directly to, he's kind of been talking in generalities a little bit. He speaks directly to this issue. Notice what he says next. We hear, this is why we're writing this letter, that some among you are idle and disruptive. Again, Paul had earlier argued, hey, stay away from anybody who might be idle and disruptive. And now he makes it clear, hey, I know, I've heard there are these people in the church currently who are idle and disruptive. There are people in the church who are taking advantage of other people in the church. Now, while we don't know who Paul and his companions heard this from,
the church is messy, y'all. Even back then, the church was messy. People are idle and disruptive. And you definitely see that today. I think it's even worse today, honestly. I don't know, because I wasn't around back then, but it's just crazy right now. Not necessarily true. You can make a great video and it doesn't get up the algorithm. And you can make a mediocre video that gets some shares and circulates. Views don't not equal quality. Yes, I agree with that. I'm like, some of the best videos that I think is good didn't get the views that I thought it would. And I didn't mean to rhyme there. But I'm like, I thought this video was amazing. People have told me it's amazing, like people close to me. But it doesn't get the views that I thought it would get. But what I realized is that the algorithm just represents what the viewers like, essentially. I studied like YouTube, it's like YouTube success videos, basically. And so the algorithm will push your video if you have high viewer duration. That's like the main thing now. If you have somebody clicking on your video and they watch till the end, the algorithm will push that video. But if they click off, let's say they click on your video and they only watch 1 minute and you made a 10-minute video, they only watch 10% of that video. That tells the algorithm, hey, this video probably isn't that good, or they're not getting what they wanted because they clicked off only watching 10% of the video. So I'm trying to not see the algorithm as something like entirely different than what the viewers want. I think they're supposed to be the same thing. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to increase my viewer duration, trying to make videos that actually are entertaining enough, but also give people enough to look forward to get to the end of the video. Because for some reason, I don't know if you checked your analytics, but on my analytics, a lot of people kind of drop off after the first minute. It starts out like 99%. The first minute, you'll see it just dip down into like 30%. It's like, I'm trying to get that straight line, 60%, 70% of people watching to the end. So I'm not sure what I got to do to make it better, but I obviously got to do something else to make the videos better, to where the people who click on it stay to the end. I made a cat video that got 2.3 million views. And I have a lot of videos that are way better that may have only gotten a few hundred or maybe even a few thousand. Cat videos are going crazy on any platform, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. You have a small channel, so it's going to be super hard to get a lot of views just yet. You have to grow into your channel, and the best way to do that is to make quality content. Give it time. Amen. Yeah, I'm doing my best to be patient with all of it, man. It's like, I was a really impatient person. Definitely before salvation and even after salvation, the Lord is still working on my patience. So I'm doing my best to be patient with it. But yeah, I do believe and I'm hopeful that I will grow in time. Appreciate the support and the encouragement, bro. All right, let's continue.
Clearly a reliable source. And Paul knows they have a history of doing this. It only makes sense. And then Paul, in case there was any confusion about this, elaborates what he means by this. And I love the wordplay he uses. He says, they are not busy with work. They are busy bodies. They're not busy in the things they should be busy with. They are busy in the things they shouldn't be busy with. Paul says, these people who are not busy with work are busy with other things. Specifically, they are meddling in the affairs of others, which is what it means to be a busybody. They are intruding and interfering in other people's lives, sticking their nose in other people's business. And while, again, we don't really know specifically, because Paul doesn't tell us, perhaps they're even trying to get others to join them in their non-working ways. Maybe that's part of, hey, you think your life's good. I'm telling you, quit your job. Do what I do. Man, I'm living the good life. I just hang out all day. And then when it's time to eat, I just go and, ask somebody in the church, hey, I need to eat. You're supposed to love me and take care of me. And, I'm a part of the church family. Like,
that's so manipulative. Just do what I do. Do nothing all day. And when it's time to eat, you're supposed to love me, take care of me. That's so manipulative. But yeah, they did that apparently in Thessalonians.
So maybe that's what's happening. We don't really know, but something is going on.
Or we don't really know, but that's an assumption that might have happened.
And whatever's going on, it's creating all sorts of discord and disunity in the church. And then at this point, Paul speaks directly to the not working camp. Anybody who might be reading this letter or hearing it read, and he says this: Such people we command and urge, there's that command language again, right? In the Lord Jesus Christ, to settle down and earn the food they eat.
And Paul wasn't playing, y'all. And really the Lord, because urge you in the Lord Jesus Christ to settle down, settle down and to earn the food you eat. You got to settle down, folks. That's what the church needs to do right now. A lot of the churches is acting a fool. What's up, Gary, man? That's pretty much all YouTubers. You're not going to get a ton of people watching all your videos or even half your videos. Just make the best videos you can. That gives you the best chance. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just make really good videos. For sure. You're only going to have a small percentage of viewers to watch your video all the way through. Just try to get to the point as soon as possible and stay on track. It gives you the best chance. Yeah, I'm trying my best to get, to the point quickly so I don't waste people's time. I think you should be, what's up, Kayla? I think you should be polite, or it's best not to watch. His star will draw the audience that wants to listen to what God has given him. Appreciate that, Kayla. Yeah, so I checked out Gary's channel. He's talking about something like, he's talking about free grace. So I like some of the content that Gary's producing. I think he has a little bit of a bigger channel than me, so trying to see it in like he's trying to give me some tips. But yeah, I think everybody's going to grow in a different way. So like what works for him might not work for me. What works for me might not work for him. So, but I do appreciate, the intention about what he's trying to do. But going to continue with this here. We're almost done with the sermon. Almost done.
So he says, such people, and you guys know who we're talking about. You have a sense of who we're talking about. We urge to settle down and earn the food they eat. Now, here's the Matt Wall's contemporary version of this verse. It's going to come up here any second now. Stop the meddling and the mooching. That's what he says. Stop the meddling, settle down. Stop being a busybody. Stop getting in other people's business. Stop interfering. Stop sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Stop the meddling. And stop the mooching. So, earn the food you eat. Quit taking advantage of other people's generosity. And then Paul shifts gears. And then he speaks now to those who have been working, to those who have been setting the example. And he says, and as for you, brothers and sisters, the ones who are really getting after it, never tire, because some of them probably were getting tired. Never tire of doing what is good. Now, in this context, again, doing what is good most likely refers to taking care of those people who legitimately do need their help. Paul's like, listen, there are people in the community and there are people in the church who legitimately need your help. There are people who are poor, people who are disabled, people who have been widowed, and don't give up on them. Don't become indifferent towards them because of these other people who are maybe causing some of these feelings to start rising up within you. There are real people in your city with real needs. And while I get you're tired of being taken advantage of, because you are being taken advantage of, never tire of doing what is good.
That's good. I'm going to read some notes from the study Bible on chapter 3, verses 6 through 15. Some people in the Thessalonian church were falsely teaching that because Christ will return any day, people should set aside their responsibilities, quit work, and do no future planning, and just wait for the Lord. They would have been waiting a long time, y'all. And quit work back in AD 30, waiting on the Lord. They'd be dead. All right, let me stop. Okay, let me continue. Wow, that's hilarious. But their lack of activity only led them into sin. They became a burden to the church, which was supporting them. They wasted time, and that could have been used for helping others, and they became meddlers. These church members may have thought that they were being more spiritual by not working. How does that make any sense? I don't know, but that's what it's saying here. But Paul tells them to be responsible and get back to work. Paul wasn't playing no games. So get back to work. Being ready for Christ means obeying him in every area of life. Because we know that Christ is coming, we must live in such a way that our faith and our daily practice will please him when he arrives.
And I know you're sick of the meddling and the mooching, like it's gotten back to us. But don't let that affect the good that you do for people who genuinely need you to do good. Never tire of doing what is good. And then Paul begins to sort of wrap up this section of the letter with these words. And I love this. Take special note of anyone who does not obey our instruction in this letter. Paul says, look around. And again, they probably read this publicly. And they're probably looking around, like taking special note of, oh, well, we know who Paul's talking about. Yeah. Take special note. And don't, as you identify those who don't seem to care about this, identify those who don't see this as a big deal. And here's why I want you to take special note. Here's why I want you to bring these people to your mind. Here's why I want you to think about this. Because I got something I want you to do. Do not associate with them. In order that, purpose, they may feel ashamed. Paul says, if there are any in the church who disregard the instructions in this letter, you need to disregard them. If there are any who ignore this command that comes from Jesus himself, you need to ignore them. So if any of these mooching, meddling individuals decide that they're not gonna change their ways, you need to make sure from this day forward, you don't do lunch with them, you don't have coffee with them, you don't do anything with them. And
y'all hear that? Y'all hear that? Leave the moochers and meddlers alone.
The reason, because you're like, man, that sounds harsh. It is harsh. But the reason they're to disassociate themselves from these kinds of people is in order that they may feel ashamed. Go back. In order that, go back. They may feel ashamed, that they may be embarrassed. And that these people need to feel it. They should be ashamed. They should be embarrassed. This should serve as a wake-up call for them.
You know what? I kind of wish when I was being a moocher for my parents and stuff, it might have been good for me. I don't know, like, I don't want to say what they should have done, but it might have been good for me to say, hey, we're just not going to give you any more money. You got to figure it out. It might have solved the situation quicker. But I ended up for years mooching off my parents in my 20s or my early to mid 20s.
And here's what Paul's saying again. Now we're going to, he's saying this, the goal of separation is restoration.
Yeah, so that's a goal, to actually bring people back, to let them feel ashamed for what they're doing, and so that they can be restored.
The goal is not to just pay them back, but to bring them back in the church, in the life of the church. The goal is not to just, again, send them packing, but to stop their slacking. The goal of separation is restoration. He wants to push these people out so they'll realize, man, I need to get back in. I need to be connected. What have I done? And I know this is what Paul means because of what he says next. He adds these final words. He says, yet, do not regard them as an enemy. They're still a part of your church family. But warn them as you would a fellow believer. They need to know you're serious about this. They need to know that you're serious about this. Now, you might be asking, we should always ask this anytime we approach scripture, what does all of this have to do with all of us? Because I know some of you are thinking that right now, man, I'm not in their category. Like I've got a job. I want to acknowledge, first of all, some of you are hard workers. I would acknowledge there are some of you who are hard workers. You get after it at work. While I don't necessarily know what you do for a living, I do know that you give it all you've got at work. You do your job as if you were made for Mondays. You do your work as if you're doing it for the Lord, and you should, because you should be doing it for the Lord. And of course, if you're a follower of Jesus, again, this is what all of us should do. Whether you teach third graders, keep the books for a small business, deliver packages, care for patients, or sell drugs. I'm talking about pharmacists here, okay? You should do what you do as if you're doing it for the Lord, because you are. You need to remember that you represent Jesus at your workplace. And you should be working as if you were made for Mondays, because you are. And here's what I would say to you. Those of you who are in that camp, you're hard workers, you give it all. Here's what I would say to you. Never tire of doing what is good. Never tire of doing what is good. There are so many of you who do so much good, not just in our community, but here in this church. You serve and you give. And honestly, you have the thought sometimes, I just want to walk away from this. I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. I feel like I'm being used. I feel like I'm a tool in the hands of certain people. But here's what I would say to you. You're doing good, even if the enemy wants you to make you think that you're not, but you are doing good, and never tire of doing what is good. Don't stop leveraging the gifts and the resources and tools God has blessed you with for his kingdom. Never tire of doing what is good. And again, I'm sure it feels like you're taking advantage from time to time. I'm sure you feel underappreciated at different moments, but never tire of doing good. So some of you who are hard workers, keep working hard and keep doing good with all that God's blessed you with. But then there's another group of you. Some of you are hardly working, okay? Some of you are hardly, you've got a job, because you're like, Matt, hold on, yes, you have a job, because that's what, I know the pushback on this, Matt. I'm not like the Thessalonians.
And this part of the sermon was, I don't know, I felt slightly convicted because I'm kind of in a weird situation to where I work in a job, right? And I'm also doing my best to build a YouTube channel at the same time. I work from home a good amount of time. So it's like when I work from home, I could do better at my job where I'm working if I didn't focus any of my energies on YouTube. But I'm trying to do both at the same time. So I'm like, what does that mean for me? Do I need to even do better at my job where I'm working at in corporate America and just do less YouTube stuff while I'm at home? Because when I'm in the office, that's when I do better, because, you can't really work on your YouTube channel while you're in the office. When I'm at home, I'm trying to build a business, trying to look up YouTube stuff, maybe making a thumbnail. We have certain guidelines on what goals to meet. You have to meet, let's say, 95%. And when I'm in the office, I hit 130%, above what they want me to hit. But when I'm at home recently, I've been doing less good in that metric. So I'm I don't know, maybe y'all could let me know what you think about that. But I could do better. But the thing is once I hit what I'm supposed to meet, I'm okay, I hit it. Now I have some extra time to put into my YouTube channel to research different topics, to maybe work on a script, to maybe work on a thumbnail, to maybe do whatever. And it's just yeah, I don't know how this applies to my specific situation.
I have a 9 to 5. I have a job. I put in work. I get a paycheck. I'm not the same. I'm not in the same situation. Well, first of all, I would say this. Some of you are hardly working at your job. Again, I don't know. I don't go to your workplace, but you know. So if it feels like I'm stepping on your toes, no, it's not. It's not me. You already know that. You already feel guilty about this. And so here's what I would say. Some of you have a job, but you don't work.
That's funny. You have a job, but you don't work. Ooh.
God's blessed you with a job. He put you in this career path, whatever it is.
And I will say that I think every job that we have as Christians, God has blessed us with that job, and we should definitely be grateful for it. But
it's just a job to you. It's just a way to put food on your table. It's to pay the bill.
And that's the thing. This is one of the hardest things, I guess, for me to wrap my head around as somebody who's trying to be an entrepreneur, as somebody who wants to do this YouTube thing full time, because that's how I've been seeing what I've been doing for so long. It's just a job. And this pastor is challenging me to see it in a different light. But it's I know that God's leading me to do this YouTube thing. And technically the only reason I'm working at my current job is to actually pay my groceries and pay different bills I need to pay. So it's this is somewhat convicting. And again, I got to figure out how I need to do better, how it applies to me specifically.
So you're you're not really working as hard as you could or you should. You're just collecting a paycheck. And you need to know, if you're a follower of Jesus, it's unacceptable to just collect a paycheck. You represent him at your place of work, wherever you work. You represent the God of the universe. You represent Jesus himself at your place of work. And it is unacceptable for you to not work hard. It is unacceptable for you not to give all you've got.
And to give me some props though, I do work hard on this YouTube thing. I do put a lot of effort into it. It's just like I'm kind of using the energies and separating them between my actual job where I get a paycheck and then this YouTube thing where I haven't yet got a paycheck. So it's kind of like, yeah, just spreading out the focus between these two things. So y'all pray for me that I figure out the right way to do both right now.
Back to God at your place of work. So if you are blessed enough to have a job, and so many of us are, do that job as if God is watching, because he is. I don't say that as like a threat, like some of you are like, oh, God, No, I say that like, look, God literally has expectations for you as you do your job. You're to do it as if you're working for him, because again, you are. Secondly, I would just this is a sort of indirect application, but I would say some of you are hardly working around here. Like, and when I say here, not just in the church, I'm talking about just in ministry, doing things for God in general. You don't really contribute in any tangible ways to what God is up to in this world. You assume that your job is just for you to put food on your table and not to put food on other people's table, not to help out in other ways. So you don't give, you don't serve, you don't do anything. And again, I don't know who you are. I'm not keeping track of this. So if it stings, it stings and it should sting.
Yeah, so that's basically the sermon, y'all. That's basically the sermon. Let me look at this real quick. Right now, Young Don is terrorizing the church. I think you should make a slew of videos refuting him. The videos about Young Don will draw more viewers, and you are helping counter his dangerous videos. Yeah, I do believe his beliefs and kind of the audience that he has is dangerous to the truth, and he has a big audience, and his views are heretical, saying you got to work for salvation, essentially. Even he probably won't admit that, but that's what it is. And yeah, I already made one video about him. I might make some more. But there's so many people, Gary, there's so many false teachers out there. So much. I probably can't run out of content to make. So I don't know if I want to be a Young Don refuting channel, just focus on one person. Whereas I can talk about Mike Todd. Mike Todd's a big one that can bring an audience to my channel. Tim Ross is his mentor. I actually have a video planned in the future about Tim Ross. So it's like maybe not just focus on Young Don, but other people. But hey, if he does something else pretty crazy that kind of gets up there in the algorithm, some kind of controversy in the future, I probably will make another video about him for sure. But yeah, the question that I have for y'all is, in what area could you work better? Hold up. In what area could you work better in that would please God? In what area could you work better in that would please God? One more time. In what area could you work better in that would please God? Just a challenge to do better in your work, whatever that is. If you're doing, if you have a business, if you are just working like a 9-to-5 job in corporate America, if you are not even working in a job, but you are actually in school full time, that's basically work. Just you're not getting paid for it, but you're putting in energy for a outcome of value. If you're doing both like me, if it could actually apply to serving at your church or doing something on the side. I think there's an area in parts of there's an area in all of our lives that we could do better in, that we might not be doing the best that we could be, and that we could improve upon. So what area in your life should you improve your work in? And pray about that, what that area should be. And yeah, let's do better because we are representatives of Christ, and the world's looking at us, how we live our lives, and how are we going to gain the respect of the world in terms of evangelism. If the world looks at us and see that we're lazy and see that we're just moochers, or we're not doing things with diligence and excellence. So, and that was a scripture he talked about earlier. It was, let me see if I can find it. Go back to it.
There's a lot of, one of these, there's a lot, right? This is the mentality that some of us have when it comes to work. I've got bills. They're sort of mooching off of, in his first lot of words to talk about this, but he does address this.
Yeah. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. So to win the respect of, I think that means the world, basically. Correct me if I'm wrong, but respect of outsiders, we need to work and work well. But that's it, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this. If you just don't like the church that I showed you, don't like the pastor, don't like the sermon, let me know. And maybe I'll find a different way to do these Bible studies. But I think this was a little bit easier to do for me. I still did do some preparation though, to know like what points to talk about. And I did bring some extra stuff into it. But let me know how you liked it. And yeah, I appreciate you for tuning in. Gary, I appreciate your tips there. Again, like it may be different for me how I grow my channel. But yeah, I'm just praying to God that I find that I do his will, that I do it in the best way that he wants me to do it. And yeah, maybe pray for me that I will follow his will for my channel. So it will bring forth fruit in the right time. But appreciate you, Kayla, for tuning in, for offering your input, and everybody else, y'all have a blessed day. I'm going to drive up to Atlanta area in a little bit here. Might take a nap first, but yeah, y'all have a blessed day, and yeah, we'll see you. I'll see you next week. We'll see you. I'm the only person on this channel. I'll see you next week. All right. Y'all have a blessed weekend.